I want to talk to you guys. Use this suit for college interviews, job interviews, proms. You know, you can even show up in your date with this.
What was your biggest motivation putting Craig's Closets in all these high schools throughout the city of Pittsburgh?
My dad. If you want to just try the jacket on, see if it fits. When my mom brought that idea to me, and she was like, you know, your dad only had one suit throughout high school and college, and he would dress it up in different ways to make it look good. We wanted to find a way to let his memory and legacy extend, and what better way than, you know, giving a suit to a young man to make him feel good. I think sometimes we overlook the simple things in life. Just a kid feeling prepared for the moments in his life. Give a kid a chance, and that's all we're just trying to do.
Awesome stuff from Cam Hayward with Peter King. You can see the full interview on the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. And that's just a powerful thing in building and shaping the overall confidence of a young man to have that suit. Like Richie and the Bear says, I feel like I'm wearing a suit of armor. There's something about wearing a suit that just makes everything feel different.
You know, Mike, one of the things in doing this story on Cam Hayward, and, you know, I have to give kudos to people at NBC, especially Matt Casey and Ron Vaccaro, who were kind of my TV bosses at NBC. And I have to give them kudos because, in essence, they wanted a story for our Christmas show, our holiday show, which was Saturday the 23rd. There was a long pregame show, a long studio show. So they wanted a story that, you know, it's not necessarily, hey, go tell us a good news story, but find us a good news story. And I had known Cam Hayward over the years. I didn't know everything, but every year the Steelers would nominate him for Man of the Year. It's happened 6 times now. He's never won, obviously. And so a couple of years ago, I started reading about the things that Cam Hayward had done. And Mike, this is the thing that impressed me so much about Cam Hayward. So his dad, Ironhead Hayward, who probably a lot of people have heard of, but if you haven't, Cam Hayward was a great college running back at Pitt. And he went on to the NFL, played for several teams, most notably New Orleans, where he was a first-round pick, and Atlanta, where he was a 267-pound running back / fullback. And his dad died going into his senior year in high school in Atlanta. So Cam has devoted his life, in essence, I want to make my father proud of me. But what so impressed me is that he has taken on some of the causes, Mike, that are oftentimes forgotten. Who says I'm going to go into 11 high schools in Pittsburgh, and any boy who wants a suit, I am going to find a way to give this kid a suit, because many of the kids live in, you know, in underserved neighborhoods. But then the other thing that he does that's so impressive that I saw is him working with young kids and grief counseling, because he remembers what it was like to not have a dad. He remembers it being the faux father, or the substitute father, to his younger brother, Connor Hayward. Now they're together. Connor Hayward's a backup tight end on the Steelers. But no one really thinks about those causes when you think about what do we want to do with our foundation. This is a guy who took 2 needed causes, you know, clothing and nice clothing for boys in high school, and then on the other hand, grief counseling to help kids, you know, who've lost a parent. So kudos to Cam Hayward.
Cam Hayward and the rest of the Steelers go all the way to Seattle for a Super Bowl 40 rematch. High stakes for both teams. Steelers at 8-7, but the last I saw, they have like a 13% chance of making it to the playoffs. Seahawks in much better position. Yeah. Do the Steelers have enough gas in the tank to go out there and give the Seahawks a tough game and maybe pull off an upset as Seattle tries to get closer to getting back to the playoffs?
Well, Mike, if you had said this to me a week ago, I would have said absolutely not. But then Mason Rudolph turned into Ben Roethlisberger, and he put up 34 on the Bengals, and they routed the Bengals. And Mike Tomlin, obviously, you got to go with the hot hand, because even before Kenny Pickett got hurt, Kenny Pickett was struggling. And they hadn't scored above 18 points in, I think, 6 weeks. So I think it's easy to look at this team right now and to say, if Mason Rudolph can be what he was last week, they can compete with anybody, because their defense obviously is good enough if they're not always being put in bad positions. So if you tell me that Mason Rudolph is 90% the player he was last week, and if he can really find a way to keep George Pickens engaged, and he was early and often last week, the Steelers definitely have a chance, but they are going to need to score in Seattle, because they hadn't been scoring until last week, and then George Pickens shook off everything. Hey, by the way, Mike, one thing I would say about Pickens is that, people who will say things like, well, Pickens proved to his detractors that he's a great player and Pickens shut everybody up. This was never about George Pickens and how good a football player he was. This is about George Pickens failing to give effort on play after play after play when he wasn't the intended receiver. And so and look, I'm not here to kill George Pickens or anything like that, but I'm here to say that if you want to be a great player in the NFL and you're a wide receiver, you have to at least most of the time play the receiver position without the ball in your hands, like Hines Ward. You just do. You better block and you better give effort for your teammates. And for much of this year, he hadn't been doing that. And last week, look, this great performance by George Pickens is still, we're not addressing one of the key issues about George Pickens, in that, he's got to play full go every snap he plays, whether he has the ball in his hands or not. And he hasn't done that so far, particularly this year, but in his career.
Peter, there's a bust in the Hall of Fame, and I suspect you voted yes when it was time for him to go in, who played when he wanted to play, took plays off when the ball wasn't coming to him. I saw him play as a rookie in Baltimore. When the play was coming to him, he sprinted out of the huddle. When it wasn't, he walked out of the huddle, and that was Randy Moss. And that is one big comparison that sticks between Pickens and Moss. And I think any great receiver, the challenges, and John Madden used to talk about this with Moss, you got to get him involved early. They want the ball because they believe, now it's not a selfish thing per se, they believe if I'm the one with the ball, we're more likely to win because look at what I can do with the ball. And the Steelers finally figured it out. The Steelers finally realized, let's get the ball in this guy's hands, because if we don't, he is going to check out, just like Randy Moss used to do. We got to get him involved. Why is he on the team if we're not going to use him? So I disagree with you on this idea he's got to go all out all the time, because Randy Moss is on the Hall of Fame and he definitely didn't. Let's just get the ball in the guy's hands, and maybe he'll go all out a little more often if he feels like he's involved in the game plan. So that was vindication of this idea. When you have someone like that, you got to get him the ball.
Well, there's something to be said for that, but if George Pickens has 43 touchdowns in his first 3 years, as Randy Moss did, there's a decent chance I'll cut him a little more slack than I do right now. But as of now,
he can't throw himself the ball,
especially
Peter,
at the goal line. I would like to see if Randy Moss walked away from blocking for one of his backs at the goal line, purposely walked away, And maybe
Peter,
he did.
walked off the field
Show
with
me
time
that-
left in
show
the
me
first
that
half in a game in Washington. He got pissed off and walked off the field to the locker room with time left in the game, for crying out loud. It's identical to the way Moss behaved. Identical.
It's not identical. Show me a play on the field at the goal line where Randy Moss on the goal line not only didn't block, but literally just jumped out of the way when one of his teammates was coming. And maybe he did it. I don't remember it, but maybe he did do that. All I'm saying, Mike, is I'm not impressed with the full-time job of Kenny Pickens. That's all I'm saying. I wouldn't want Kenny Pickens on my team.
I'll say this. If social media was around when Randy Moss was playing, I bet we would have seen a lot of clips of Randy Moss half-assing it during games. It would have been isolated, distributed, and gone viral because he half-assed it during games. But those didn't make the highlights on ESPN, which was really our only way to see what had happened in a game at the time. All right, Rams at the Giants. We touched on this earlier. Matthew Stafford. And we got to go fast now. We're having some good conversation, but that means we don't have a lot of time for the other stuff. Rams, Giants, Rams closing in on a playoff berth. Matthew Stafford, you mentioned the possibility of MVP. I think that's a high bar. I think comeback player of the year. You could sell me on that. MVP for an 8-7 team, that's a little bit too much for me.
I don't know that. Wait, that's why I say, can we watch the next two games? If Matthew Stafford this week does what he should do and beats the Giants in the Meadowlands, and then next week beats the 49ers, and plays well in both games, he'll be one of the 5 people on my ballot.
Yeah, well, and look, that's entirely possible. What do you think about him as comeback player of the year, though? Because he was one of the ones, I think it went Damar Hamlin, then Joe Flacco, then Baker Mayfield, then maybe Matthew Stafford as potential comeback player of the year. He may have been farther down, but that would be a potential award for him, given what he's done this year and given all the injuries last year and the ineffective play.
My feeling about comeback player of the year is that I said this from the start, that if Damar Hamlin plays a snap in 2023, he's my comeback player of the year. Now, I haven't given it deep thought right now, but I'll be very surprised if I don't vote for Hamlin, number one. And, Mike, I looked this up earlier in the week. Matthew Stafford had 303 pass attempts last year, and I understand he was hurt. But to me, this award, it can't be for a guy who played 60% of the games last year, at least to me.
Well,
I look at a guy.
We don't know what that award's for. They don't tell us what that award's for.
You're right. You can, if you wanted to vote for Matthew Stafford, I wouldn't say dumb vote. I would just say, well, I feel there ought to be different criteria. To me, Baker Mayfield, 2 teams gave up on him last year: the Carolina Panthers and then the Rams. The Rams could have signed him as the backup and maybe even the future after what is a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Matthew Stafford, but they didn't. So he goes to a third team and he probably wins the division with Tampa this year. So I think that's a very good vote. And Flacco, obviously, it's a strange vote, but it's justified.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.